you very much for coming for these sessions. I think we will still wait for several speakers to come, but I have briefed them, so I'm assuming they understand what would like to talk about. Good morning, nearly afternoon. Thank you very much again for coming for this session. The title is Igniting Internet Governance Discussions on the Ground. This is a merging sessions covering the issues of Jack. You are. So this is a merging session covering the issue of internet governance processes within a country or region and the ASEAN ICT Master Plan, which might be able to influence the processes. Well, since day one, we have heard about the internet governance discussions. We have heard about the multi-stakeholder processes. In my point of view, perhaps I'm wrong, but correct me if I'm wrong, there are many assumptions under the multi-stakeholder cooperations. Yeah, we have a lot of assumptions and prerequisites before we can really sit down together as a multi-stakeholder to really talk about the issue of internet governance. So we have been talking this at the global level. We have the IGF for 10 years and will be prolonged for another 10 years. But how about what's really happening on the ground? So we are really lucky to have this panel. There are two parts of the sessions because this is a merging one. The first part will talk about the what really happening on the ground on the internet governance discussions, more into the processes rather than the content. The speakers, we have Wanawit, the Executive Director for Electronic Transactions Development Agency of Thailand. We will also have Nica Dumlao from the Philippine Internet Freedom Alliance. We also have Phu Hong Lien from, he is the chairman of the Vietnam Internet Associations. When also we have Jack Key, SM Key. She is one of the Associative Progressive Communications, and also multi-stakeholder advisory group member at the Internet Governance Forum. So we have a great resources from Malaysia, from Thailand, from the Philippines, from Vietnam to talk about what is really happening on the internet governance discussions. The second part, we will touch upon the ASEAN ICT Master Plan. We will have Rajneesh Singh from, he is the Director of Asia Pacific Regional Bureau at the Internet Society. He's not here yet, but he will. And Lee Xiu-go from Google. He's the country lead for public policy and government in Southeast Asia. So without further ado, I will ask the speakers to speak. For the first session, I will ask Jack, Nica, Wanawit, and Phu Hong Lien. So that's an order. So we have Jack first. If you can speak about your experience, what is actually the discussions that's really relevant for internet governance to happen in discussions, yeah, to happen in Malaysia? What is the enabling factors? What is the inhibiting factors for that really happening? Whether the multi-stakeholder cooperation is feasible in Malaysia context? Please do so.
Okay, feasibility is a very interesting question. So Malaysia is a very interesting development of internet governance structures. It started off being quite forward-looking, so we were quite early adopters in terms of looking at access to ICTs, looking at how ICTs can really enable development, can support governance, etc., etc. And one of the early kind of pillars to facilitate this process was the MSC Bill of Guarantees. So this is basically like building the multimedia super corridor. So it's multimedia super corridor Bill of Guarantees. This was done in consultation, especially with industry players, because Malaysia has a very bad reputation for being terrible on freedom of expression issues. So this was like quite an important agreement to make that, okay, you know, if you have the internet within the MSC Bill of Guarantees and also within one of the key legislation pieces that came out of this, which is the Communications and Multimedia Act, there is a specific section that says nothing shall be construed as censorship of the internet. So this was a very important guarantee that was being made. And given, you know, in this particular context of having a bad reputation. So in the early days, a lot of structures were being built. So, and they were built very much on the principles of multi-stakeholder participation, which was one of the key principles that underpins internet governance processes, right? that you have different stakeholders coming together, having conversations about internet policy as it's emerging, and getting all these different points of views through before you make any kind of decision. But that was like, gosh, a long time ago already lah. That was maybe like in the early 90s, late 80s. Yeah, when Mahathir, you know, this is the Mahathir's Vision 2020. He was quite actually visionary in that sense, really seeing the role of ICTs in the country. But since then, so for example, we have things like the Content Forum, which is really a multi-stakeholder forum process that looks at developing a self-regulatory content code for the internet. So it included people like in the advertising industry, in broadcasting, there's even a civil society rep, there's people within government, and it was kind of functioning that way. But fast forward to now, this has really changed. Just as the internet has changed, the context of this has also really, really changed. The idea of multi-stakeholder participation has significantly eroded. And the kind of body, which is the multimedia, MCMC, Multimedia, Malaysia, gosh, what does it stand for? There you go, Malaysia Communications and Multimedia Commission. It is basically a body under the government, and it's become like a modern day, can I even say this here? Maybe I shouldn't say it. It's become kind of like, you know, it's started to really become the final say in anything that has to do with the internet. It's become that kind of a body. And it operates in a very interesting way. It takes on a lot of things, and it's not necessarily always transparent in terms of its decisions, and not very approachable. Doesn't really engage with civil society, for example, and not very accountable to some extent. So in the days where we used to think that nothing on, you know, censorship on the internet was like, wow. Now everybody kind of accepts a little bit, some level of censorship, some level of filtering, right? So MCMC have also started to do this. But the processes behind it has been rather opaque. So there's no explanation of which aspect of the law is it actually contravening. Used to be just the error 404 page. You can't get access to it, it's an error page. I think starting from maybe even late last year, they've started to put up at least a holding page that says, Makluman, for your information, this site has contravened this act, and therefore you cannot access it. But under which section in this act, we don't know lah. Anyway, the act is quite a funny act, because even though it has within the act itself that says nothing in this act shall be construed as censorship of the internet, it also gives MCMC powers beyond executive powers, like, you know, it has the final say. So it's a bit of a funny act. And then it has something within this section, there's a section within this act as well that says that covers things as broad-ranging as fraud, to deliberate, I guess, messing with the network infrastructure, to things like if you use anything, if you use the internet to annoy someone, you have the same level of punishment as using it to basically steal someone's property. So it's kind of very broad-ranging. And the significant shift, I guess a milestone in the shift of state perception towards the role of internet is probably the 2008 elections, where given that we were quite an early adopter, so what happened is that the Malaysian public became a very dynamic and vibrant internet user public. So they really understood technology, really innovated, really enjoyed using it, and it also provided like this kind of strange space of freedom that you don't have in other spaces, because media is very, very heavily regulated and has close affiliations with political parties. So the online space became this other space where you could get information, you could get alternative news, you could get insights, commentaries, and opinions, which you were not allowed to have in other spaces. And it also helped to build up a kind of political sensibility in terms of supporting public participation. It really supported in a lot of discourse. From, you know, quite serious commentary to memes. We love our memes. Every time there is some kind of scandal happening, for sure there'll be 10 million memes. I love it. So that's kind of like the backdrop in terms of engagement. And then, so that it also supported a lot of development of alternative news sites. And I think that's also quite critical in terms of, like, you know, actual sustained enterprises that became organizational institutions. So Malaysia Kini, for example, has existed for a long time, and for an online alternative news site, it really is like hats off lah, that you're still able to sustain yourself for quite so long. But came 2008, the ruling coalition lost control over a few very important key states, also won by the slimmest majority since independence. So that was a real shock. Like, oh shit. Can say shit. Like, oh no, like, oh no, this space is like, giving people power. We have to control this space. This is a terrible space. It's so unruly. So there's a lot more concerted effort to provide some level of regulation around this. So it starts from things like hiring cyber troopers. So these are like, individuals who are really scouring the internet to look at what people are saying and doing two roles. Actually three roles. One is to kind of like troll users and make them feel kind of afraid. Second is kind of social surveillance. They're like the internet police, right? Looking at who's saying what and hanging on to that. And I can't remember the role, but that's kind of what their role is. Two things are really starting to look at amendments towards the CMA to make it even a much more stronger and more empowered act. So that's now 2016, and since late last year, there has been announcements to say that the Communications and Multimedia Act, so this is the Pillar Act, right? That they want to basically make amendments to it to change it so that it will keep up with internet development. But essentially, we're not quite sure what's within it because all of the conversations is closed. Even though they're supposed to have consultation with different stakeholders, definitely civil society was not consulted. We know that there were some consultations with media players, so people who were in the media doing things like media convergence. There were some consultations with some private sector stakeholder groups. So what we were really and because of that consultation, we were able to get some insights into what the conversation was about and what some of the proposed amendments were. So included within that was things like preemptive blocking, registration of bloggers, which is announced in the press, and potentially also data retention at the ISP level of user contact. So I mention this because it's very important for civil society to really have allies and good working relationship with people in the private sector, and also in the media industry as well. Because this kind of really helps to, because at some points we all come in, that's what the multi-stakeholder model is, right? You all come in with different interests, but at some point in the Venn diagram, there's some bits that you concur. So you kind of have to keep those relationships open to find where is that little bit in the middle where you agree and can work together. So that has been quite invaluable in terms of our organizing. The other part that's quite invaluable in terms of our organizing is also building a coalition of civil society groups. So we organized and built a coalition at the beginning of this year called Moderator. It's a coalition of 9 organizations. And within this coalition, even though we have a very dynamic internet community, it doesn't quite translate into a dynamic internet rights community among civil society groups. So a lot of people who are taking on these issues were either traditional human rights groups, free expression groups, free media groups, and so on. So the coalition built, but then there are some people within civil society in Malaysia who are engaging in internet governance processes who can bring this conversation onto the table. So the coalition is really to also find that little bit in the middle of the Venn diagram amongst diversity in civil society organizations who's working on human rights, working on women's rights, working on child rights, working on press freedom and media freedom, and monitoring arrests and stuff, and finding that little bit in the middle where we go, actually, the internet is a very important organizing space. So how can we work together as a coalition to push back these amendments that seem to be quite scary, but B, also to kind of build capacity amongst the constituencies that we work with to really start to understand and have a conversation around internet rights. And that's kind of where we are at. Initially, we came up to push back against the CMA amendments, but now we're really also trying to really work on the ground to try and say that, okay, we are a bit tired to hear what the government thinks about the kind of internet we should have for our safety or for our good, etc. We want to come up with the people's, we can't use the word declaration because that's politically solid now, but the People's Charter of Internet Rights and Freedom, and that requires a lot of conversations with different stakeholder groups. And this diversity in civil society organizing in the coalition is quite critical, because what we are getting also in our first on-the-ground conversation is perspectives that we don't normally hear, which is not so much around, say, political speech only. One of the two big stakeholder groups that had a lot of insights to give, one was the Indigenous Peoples Group, and second was the Sexual Rights Group. So I think we are also learning a lot through this process, and I'll end here.
Thank you very much, Jack. I think it's really interesting to see how the multi-stakeholder cooperation, I think Jack just mentioned some prerequisite before we have that. The regulation is really important, and the government openness as well. And I think it's really clear in Malaysia, perhaps the civil society cooperations with private sectors is more tangible at this point. I think we go from Malaysia, can we go to, I think go to to Thailand first, because I think one of it is coming from the government. So it's nice to hear the story from Thailand, from the multi-stakeholder cooperation. So perhaps one of it, and after that, Nica.
Okay, thank you. Put me on the spot. So, so I'm Vanawit from we are Electronic Transaction Development Agency. We are public organizations. It's a hybrid between governments and private sector. Our board member is coming from private sector. So if we talk about this topic, I think the key issues that we have to understand is that the government is every government seems to be a big brother. Kind of, they're still in that stage, get stuck there and trapped in there. When we step in to work with the local Thailand IGF, it took a lot of time for us first to clarify our position, because there will be more than 15 or 20 government office who having a legal enforcement, legal power to get in, like Jack said. It's confusing. They can get in any reasons. And that are the problems we face. So we want to have this Thailand IGF as a floor that everybody comes, and it's like a clearinghouse of the ideas to balance. Even when you talk about national security, safety, it might affect the privacy aspects. Even in ICANN, also running the working group called Public Safety Working Groups. There are big fight between the Food and Drug Administration, who control the online pharmacies, and privacy proxy issues that people are hiding behind the privacy proxy services. And the government like to know who really run the online. And when you go to the court, at least in US, it took 48 hours fastest to get a court order. And then the criminal is gone. You have to bear in mind that internet is one of the technologies that's killing people. Not many technologies that really can do that. Electricity is under control because of that issues. But we want to look to it as a public safety. Community have to make a decision. We have a case that if you see your child posting pornography pictures, currently there are no 911 to call, and be sure that the picture is not go cross border or cross the platform to another platform. And we are in last minute technologies, but we cannot do this. And that's the concern that the government like to having this kind of internet governance forum to really discuss. The people that relate to religious have different concerns than the people in art and culture. The gender, I used to have the case that somebody want to get, this is a famous case, somebody want to get .thai. And as you know, we have a lot of problem of pornography websites. We have all these problems. As long as it will be .com, .net, it's not a problem. But if they start to have the top level domain called .thai, then that will be a problem. And thanks to the movement of the gender supporting me on this issue. So these are the benefits we do see, and I as a government, we are different. We want to nurture the IGF to be sure that their opinion is heard officially. That's why I push for NI to have the linkage, communicate, make a paper. Normally they come and talk, and then they're going back. And I cannot use the paper to against another 20 government office that try to do something. I said, this is community make a decision, they want to do like this. And this is what important for the message. I think it's important for the IGF, local IGF, at the root level to understand the formality is required, even though you want to be independent, but how your voice are heard. You need to structure it. You need to make a paper out. You have to dare to put the committee's names there, because it needs to communicate officially, then the government can react. Otherwise it's become like a mob, kind of, that's what we see. You just come and complain to the government and sit and listen and say, make advice in a way that is concrete, and we can carry on and talk to the other government or legislative. Thailand are drafting a new law on computer crimes that people are talking about. So I will not go into detail of that, but it's in the process to improve the way that we could control or prevent the government in the way that to enter into the censorships or blocking. So that in short, what I can talk about the role of government to the local IGF. Thank you.
Thank you, Wanawit. Now we go to Philippines. I guess Wanawit also mentioned very important points on that he pushed the multi-stakeholder or the IGF, local IGF, not only to talk, but also produce something concrete. And it's a bit difficult in several experience as well in Indonesia. Now we go to Philippines, Nica?
So Malaysia, Thailand, and the Philippines. Yeah. So compared to Malaysia and Thailand, maybe the Philippines is like in a more friendly moment. But I'm sure some of you have followed the developments in the Philippines and the disputes. You know that we have just concluded our national elections 2 months ago, and now we have a new president, and we also have a new set of legislators. So the State of the Nation address has just been concluded last week, or 3 days ago, I think. And the president laid out his plans during the State of the Nation address. So before, we also only had an attached office, the ICT office of the Department of Science and Technology, leading the development of our country's ICT policies and standards. Now, we already have a cabinet-level agency that can do this. The previous administration, before vacating their office, did 2 things that impacts the ICT policy and internet governance landscape in the country. They signed the Department of ICT law, and the next is they appointed commissioners to the National Privacy Commission. So just a note that we already had like this data privacy law since 2012, and it was only this year, after 4 years, that the commission was established. So the new administration now, has already appointed a Department of ICT secretary. So and this secretary comes from the private sector. So some sections in the civil society are worried that that the secretary might always side with the private sector, but what's new, right? So in general, it looks like stakeholders are in a wait-and-see stage when it comes to how internet governance will look like in the next maybe 6 years. But of course, I'm sure civil society will make sure to maximize the opportunities, since everything's like in their early stages. So we can, be there and influence the processes, the new policies. Yeah. So we also have a liberalized telecommunications and internet environment, and this has been raised, I think, by in the synthesis document discussion, where we have like a problem when it comes to internet connectivity. So in general, so the liberalized telecommunications and internet environment has undoubtedly been a big factor in the increasing communication access of Filipinos. But this ecosystem is private sector led. So it presents challenges, no? And as large corporations have become dominant, and in the Philippines we have a very weak regulatory agency. So it poses serious problem when it comes to protection and protection by the government, and to make sure also that 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 will be able to really have a say in this ecosystem. Or we can have a say, but if they will be able to really, you know, listen to it and enforce something about it. There are also doubts whether the government has the proper orientation and capacity to evolve a policy framework on internet governance that's progressive and forward-looking, given that there are bad laws, you know, in the Philippines. And I don't know if you've heard about our cybercrime law. This has been briefly discussed yesterday in a panel, where we have this law that is initially it has like very contentious provisions on surveillance and takedowns, etc. And then many people or many civil society organizations and stakeholders, academics, legal organizations questioned it, and some of the provisions of that law were like declared unconstitutional, but still there. And some people are worried that, or civil society are worried that the implementing rules and regulations of that law is also bad, that it might also lead to surveillance, and it's actually leading to increase in cyber libel cases in the country. So what are the efforts from various stakeholders that have been that are being made to address these issues? Well, from an internet governance point of view, it's just there are civil society-led initiatives to make sure that these issues are being discussed. So last year there was IGF in Brazil, and the Philippines has been really thinking about sending a delegation. So since they wanted to, you know, bring a government delegation to the IGF, they wanted to also know what to do. So since there are civil society organizations and technical community people that are active in the IGF space, they of course ask us about our opinions, about our insights, and that's actually positive, because you have like this level of or not you are more aware of the IGF than they are, right? So the civil society and the community and the government organized a pre-IGF multi-stakeholder consultation, and there we were able to collect inputs from different stakeholders on what issues should be raised by the government delegation in the IGF. But the thing is, you don't really have to have like, you know, I don't know if there will be a space for the government delegation to have, you know, to raise those issues in the IGF, because IGF is, as we have observed, like, you know, different sessions. How will you be able to really be able to bring your position as a government to anyone, right? So there. Also, there's since we have a new National Privacy Commission, there are local civil society communities, tech communities, and even the private sector are very involved now in crafting the implementing rules and regulations. The National Privacy Commission even partnered with the civil society organization in the Philippines where I where I formally associated with, which is the Foundation for Media Alternatives. They've been partnering with the National Privacy Commission to conduct public consultations and to also for FMA, for the Foundation for Media Alternatives, to really mobilize inputs from different sections of the society, not just those who know how ICT works, but also mobilize those who will be affected, by this by the law. So I think that's it.
It's very interesting to see the Philippines. It's nice to know that you have the pre-consultation, the consultation before the IGF in Brazil, right?
Sorry, but they didn't push through with yeah, they didn't push through with attending the IGF in Brazil actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because of some logistical problem.
It was too far, perhaps. Now we go to Vietnam. Would like to hear from Mr. Phu Hong Lien from the Internet Society, Vietnam Internet Associations. Your story, sir.
I share something about the Vietnam in situation for the government internet. In Vietnam, they consider internet in the telecom sector, and also general they always the thing about the ICT sector. Inside ICT has the telecom, and inside telecom has the internet. So legal environment always based on the ICT first. So all the degree for the ICT, for telecom, that's the control for the internet environment. So the internet beginning the government, Vietnamese government have the policy that the development of the internet based on the ability of the management of the government. So now the change to policies that the management of the government have to follow the development of the internet in Vietnam. So that's quite so good now. And the government issues many licenses for the ISP in Vietnam. Many easily, not very difficult. But domino ISP in Vietnam now, just the count is a number about 4 or 5 provider, like VNPT, FPT, Netnam, and Vietnam or something. So biggest the ISP in Vietnam own almost that the state-owned company. That's a really issue. So MIC is the Ministry of Ministry of Information and Communication. Is the government, I mean the regulator in Vietnam. But also MIC plays a role as the investor to the state-owned company. But the biggest, the state-owned company, that's the biggest ISP in Vietnam. Then the government only by regulation, but they can manage the ISP in Vietnam by the conduction by policy and very close to ISP in Vietnam. So that makes the many. So even the government control for the new technology, new services, and even the spectrum for the frequency. So even recently, you know, the Vietnam, that one country very update new technology, very quality, and develop the internet in Vietnam quickly. But now in Vietnam just have the 3G, not yet 4G. So the demand of the user not miss the demand for that. That's the really issue, because the government still keeps the conservative for the 4G because of many reasons. And that's the government in Vietnam based under the MIC. There are the bureau in each province. So each province they can governance the internet in their province. So sometimes makes a different policy and different between the province. In Vietnam, we have the VNIC. VNIC, that's one the organization based on managed by the MIC, but the VNIC plays a role between the government and the ISP. And I think maybe in other countries they have the association for internet that the on behalf of the ISP can do something. But VNIC in Vietnam, they on behalf of internet, the interconnection between the ISP on the networking, and also on behalf of ISP to connect and to deal with the other organization of the world, international or regional organization. That I think maybe different with the other country. So the government of the MIC in Vietnam by that way, so the government controls so very close to the environment for internet, and even sometimes some issue which the government couldn't follow or couldn't manage, the government normally keeps the situation in in standby or in idle situation.
Mr. Lin, how about the civil society? MIC is really government and ISP, so the other voices, civil society, academician, are they also on the board?
I think the concerning to the social, I think there are many associations in Vietnam. VIA is one of association, and VIA is the youngest association. Before that, there are many associations concerning to the telecom and internet in Vietnam, and now VIA. With the almost member, that's the old telco, old ISP, begin in Vietnam. We, on behalf of the member of the ISP and service provider in Vietnam, connect to the government and have the lobby to the government and have to contribute to the build the legal environment in Vietnam. The MIC always gets the idea, information from VIA before the issues, the new decree or new circular, very open to get the information from VIA, from the enterprise or from the service provider. I think that's so good, but the relation with the international organization, now the service provider can connect to international organization, but almost the important issue is that still the government MIC or VNNIC or the government organization still on behalf of all the ISP in Vietnam to deal with that. So,
I think we can move because I would like not to make this as a monologue, but more into dialogue with the participants. So we go to the more regional level. We go to Rajnet Singh and Win. Lee Shun-go, Lee first, to talk about the ASEAN ICT Master Plan and whether you think that this might be able to ignite the internet governance discussions in ASEAN. We see the political context is very relevant. So.
Okay, but before I start, it's just a quick show of hands who has heard about the latest ICT Master Plan. Except you will know. The ASEAN ICT Master Plan 2020. Like less than 5 people, I guess, around there. Okay, it's quite clear, right? And I take note of the fact that we need time for discussions Q&A. So I'll keep this really quick, right? So the ASEAN ICT Master Plan, just to give some context, it's really kind of like a vision that ASEAN put together. It's part of the whole ASEAN integration plan thing. And I think the main reason why a lot of people have not heard about it is, first, it's not been talked about a lot, let's say, in the press. I think certain countries have been talked about more than some other countries. But more importantly, I think in the context of people in the room, and I can just read off the plan we need to, it's very economic development focused. So I think if you are interested in this one, I will look at it from more of an inclusive growth perspective. And bear in mind, because it's ASEAN and the way ASEAN works, it's more by consensus and arrived at after a series of discussions and agreements. So if you look at in terms of ICT across ASEAN, you have a huge disparity in terms of the capabilities in every aspect, from skills to infrastructure to manpower, right? So in some sense, when you read the ASEAN Master Plan, you'll find that, wow, they talk about really basic stuff like providing literacy and access. At the same time, you hear about things like IoT, which is really out there, right? Like the next stage of development. And that's also because it's a reflection of ASEAN. Now, in terms of the process, I think the way the ASEAN works, I think in terms of governance, internet governance process, is best for people to engage there at the national level, because that's how it floats up into the ASEAN discussions, where the national governments will then have a discussion with their counterparts on, what we need to do as a region. And bear in mind that there's so much disparity, it's important for each country to then put forth exactly what they think is important for their country and how ASEAN can then help us, right? Help each other, actually. So just to give it a sense of why it's so economic focused, right? I'm just reading off, let's say, what's on the ASEAN Master Plan. First, the first thing that I mentioned was economic development and transformation, about the importance of ICT to enable sustainable economic development. The next thing to talk about is people integration and empowerment through ICT. And even in that aspect, is around economic development, about people movement across borders in terms of jobs and development. Then they talk about innovation, yet a very economic focused one. Infrastructure development, and when they talk about that, it is in the sense of providing a strong infrastructure backbone to create a sustainable digital economy to grow and thrive. Human capital development is similar. Number 6, ICT in the single market. And 7, in terms of new media and content. Even then, they talk about things like widening and deepening engagement for co-creation of services to unlock opportunities for participation and growth. So again, a very, very economic-focused narrative here. And the last piece on information security and insurance, they do talk about things like data protection, but you notice they use a lot of words around things like malicious software, data theft, and online fraud. Again, all tied to the whole so-called digital ecosystem narrative. I think in terms of internet governance, I think that's something that maybe it'd be interesting to talk about more, let's say, in next year's APRIGF or this year's IGF, so the role of the smaller enterprises. Because I think everything that we talk about is in the ASEAN Master Plan. It is about inclusive growth. It is about enabling people to get access to the right infrastructure. And most of the time, given that 99% of businesses in ASEAN are SMEs, I think that's where a lot of the government, in terms of where they're coming from and think about the master plan, is how do they help the SMEs excel and therefore help create jobs and services for their people. I think that's a really interesting area where we can explore in terms of how civil society can then work with SMEs, whether you trade associations or even associations like the Internet Association in Vietnam, right? So think about how we can help SMEs, put forth their needs or their narratives to the government in a more succinct way. I mean, SMEs, they are basically running around doing lots of things. They don't have time to think about the broader picture, and they really rely a lot of help on other people to help them kind of consolidate their views. There are lots of consultations, and again, it depends really at the country level how consultations take place. And I really think that this is one area where, you know, in terms of the multi-stakeholder model, we could actually put in more investments in. Yeah. Let's leave it as that.
In the discussions of economic development, can be more engaging other than only human rights or gender or arts and culture.
Yeah, I think all of these things are really important in the concept of internet governance. But the way I look at it as well, I mean, we also need to think about how SMEs think about it, because they are a major kind of employer of people in each country, and that's really important. But once you get that right, in terms of the access issues, in terms of digital literacy issues, that comes in more clearly, and I think people can see the value to them in terms of their livelihood.
So put them on the table as well, yeah, so as part of the multi-stakeholder. Okay, can we move to ISOC? Raj, would like to make a comment on that?
Thanks for this opportunity. So last year, the Internet Society commissioned a report on the ASEAN economies, and with the AEC getting into gear shortly, we thought it was a timely opportunity to do this report. And basically what it does is looks at the 10 ASEAN countries, the infrastructure that exists in the countries, and tries to basically map out where they stand in terms of each other. Now, I think anyone who knows about ASEAN realizes that there's great diversity in the 10 economies that make up the ASEAN. You've got the Singapores and the Malaysias of the world at one end, and you've got Laos and Myanmar and others at the other end. Quite a few economies in between. So there are basically three levels, if you like, that we identified where the countries exist in. The report is available on our website. I won't go through that, but please feel free to download it. It's a free download on that. But out of the report, there were 10 recommendations that were made, and I just want to highlight 2 of those. One, number 8 said governments need to lead in using ICTs to extend inclusion. And number 10 said promoting capacity building is a key part of empowerment. And both go to basically ensuring that people who don't have access need to have access. But once they have access, it's not just a matter of providing access. You need to go to the next level, which is empower them to use what they have in order to better their lives, and which is, I think, what some of the other speakers have mentioned in their interventions. One of the issues, I think, is that, you know, if you look at the ASEAN Master Plan, or the AEC as a whole, really. And I've been following that for a couple of years now, seeing how that's been developing. It's very obvious that there's going to be a lot of challenges for ASEAN to do what it aspires to do. I think AEC is really an aspiration, and there's a lot of hurdles on the way to get there. Some things will be far more easy to do than others, but ultimately I think a lot of the things will go down to the fact that the infrastructure across the 10 economies are not the same, at the same level. Neither are the resources, be they financial or human. So there's a lot of challenges that will come out, and perhaps the internet itself may be a way in which some of those issues could be addressed, not necessarily solved, but at least addressed. Thailand, as an example, recently announced their plans to connect virtually every village in the country as it's Thailand 4.0, I think it's called. But again, it's an aspiration, right? So let's look at it from that perspective. And I think that's where we really need to get to. But there's also the issue of ensuring that people are trained and empowered, which then brings me to the issue of internet governance and what does that have to do with all this. You know, we've seen across time, as you know, post-WSIS and when the IGF started off and up to this day, as more people have connected, they have, you know, after getting the access thing sorted out, then they started realizing there's other issues. You know, there's gender issues, there's security issues, there's privilege. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. And the same thing will happen to when we have all these new communities coming on online, that there will be issues that will pop up. One extra challenge I think ASEAN has, that there's a large number of languages used in the region, and most of the documentation and literature, unfortunately, is in English, which may not really be relevant or be easily understood. And that cuts across all the issues. And it's not just talking about infrastructure or high-level policy or technical mumbo-jumbo that we get involved with. So that's also an issue. So how do you bring all these people back into the fold? The regional IGF, such as this, I think is good, but really those discussions need to happen at the local level. and again, having been involved since the WSIS days, what I see is that, there's the global discussions and people get very excited about it. Oh, I need to go to the global IGF in all these exotic locations around the world. Oh, Bali, Guadalajara, Vulameni in Greece, Istanbul. I mean, whoa, it ticks all the boxes for bucket list. But the fact remains that sometimes those global discussions don't really resonate at the local or even regional level. And sometimes the discussions you need to have locally have to be localized discussions with local context and local issues, which may have nothing to do with what's happening at the global level. So I think some of us have to be a bit less excited about the global stuff and ensure that, ultimately it's acting locally which is going to have an impact on the global thing. Not, trying to do what's happening in the rest of the world and then trying to copy it down to where you are in your locality. So it's very promising from my and the Internet Society's perspective to see a lot of national level IGFs and IG discussions blossoming up. And there's also an issue there, at least I see it as one. Sometimes we have competing groups wanting to do a national IGF. So I don't think we should be locking it down that, let 1,000 flowers bloom. It shouldn't be just someone has the right to do an IGF, It's an internet governance dialogue. It's a discussion, and I don't think just because someone's already done it, people can collaborate, work with others, but then that should not be a barrier for others to also do similar things, as long as there's collaboration, better coordination, and then the reporting back into the wider, bigger picture issues that exist. Let me stop there. I'm rambling on too much. Thanks.
Idea of acting locally, because I think that's really why this session also happening. We have all the discussions in a very good places, but what happened in our local. Would like to go to the participants or people, or also you are also resource person, to tell us the comment to the distinguished speakers.
Very quickly, I just make one intervention. Nica was very polite and diplomatic in what she said about the new secretary. So let me say what she cannot say, which is the fact is the person who's come in is from a telco, and that has its own issues. So,
okay. Any questions or comments, or would like to share something from the participants? We will have lunch 30 minutes later, so don't worry. Any comments? Or if not, perhaps I ask first, to give a discussion. So, Internet Governance Forum at the global level has its names the best practice forums. In one of its document, it's a multi-stakeholder cooperations. And there are some inhibiting factors for in multi-stakeholder. It means it's like a bad actors, it's like the trust building issues. But I think from the discussion that we have here, I think the most relevant for ASEAN at least is the political context. Who has the power, who has the closest power to the government, also the capacity. So from the speakers, if you can make a comment on that. So if we have to make our own best practice forum for ASEAN for multi-stakeholder cooperation, what would you think is necessary for us to either put it as an enabling factors or inhibiting factors? That's my question. But I really would like to have others to also have a comment on that. Would like to start? I give it to Jack.
Yeah, that's a bit harder. But actually, I've been thinking quite a lot about doing a national IGF, actually, in Malaysia. I've been thinking quite a lot about it. I think it's actually, the reason for that is because I think somehow the Internet Governance Forum format allows us to sit down, look at us here, right, in a table, coming from all different stakeholder groups, to be able to somehow have a conversation that's quite difficult in a non-immediately antagonistic way. And that actually is very valuable, because sometimes you do need to have these kinds of conversation. And for me, one of the best values of Internet Governance Forums is actually capacity building. You really are able to kind of get a lot of people together to sit down and think about what are Internet governance issues by sharing what you know and having conversations about emerging key issues. And those two pieces of, I mean, I've been doing IGF for way too long, but these two things somehow really resonates. But at the same time, there are some things that are very important to happen also in preparation for this. So, for example, I come from civil society, and I really do think that it's quite important also to have civil society to come together as civil society in all of our diversity, to think through about what are some of the key internet policy issues that's important to us, and to articulate that. So we are having APR IGF now, like a week before the ASEAN People's Forum, which is really quite important. And the first time I read the ISOP report and the ICT ASEAN Master Plan was last year, before last year's ASEAN People's Forum, because we were really trying to prepare to have a regional conversation about this issue. Like, you know, what is the critical issue about internet access to us as a region, and what pulls us together despite our diversity? What are some of the core things that we can think about and connect and collaborate with? And that kind of a space is quite important, even as we're thinking about multi-stakeholder. But I think, Shita, you're absolutely right. Political context matters a lot in this region, because it also, you know, it's a very diverse region actually. Even if you're just looking at Southeast Asia, with different political kind of organizing, languages, etc., etc. So that adds an additional challenging layer. And that also adds the kind of compulsion for us as civil society to also sit down and think through and understand each other's contexts better, in order to be able to kind of draw something out to see, okay, so this is something that we need to talk about. Another opportunity, I think, is really the increasing interest and conversation around access to the internet and its link to the Sustainable Development Goals. For us, this is an important thing, no, in this context, and looking at how ICTs for development and how this intersect also with human rights issue, and not necessarily just civil and political rights, but also economic, social, and cultural rights. And how can we start to have this conversation about like right to health, right to education, and all of these different capacities, and how they also interlink to right to freedom of expression, information, so on and so forth. So yeah, lots to talk through.
Because if you look into the multi-stakeholder, there are several layers that involve. Naturally, the diversity is also related to qualities, to building up the knowledge. The problem we have is the technical knowledge and the language barriers. You can sit in an ICANN meeting and you don't understand at all what they're talking, no matter how good English you are. I remember the first time I going there, I thought I was going to the telex room when I was a kid, and then the dealing room, that trading, the exchange of the currency, they have all this jargon. And that, I think that one of the most important things that I do see as a role of governments too. We need to also coordinate among government, because every government have their own silo that they work. The one who work with ITU, the one who work with IEEE, IEGF, and internet start to become the cross-cutting issues. Even in the trade, we heard this morning, the Ministry of Commerce have their own interests, and then we start to talk about the cross-border e-commerce, which means internet. But they use the word cross-border e-commerce. So these are the things, I think, that how we organize amongst AP. It's also important to have the intricacies of what we try to do. Like ASEAN ICT Master Plan, it should be in line with the others as well. For example, I like to make things concrete, that we need the input from the communities. We talk about the theme of merging physical space and cyberspace. The electronic identity, what we like to do about it. Can the government just issue the electronic identity for you? They have the e-government website, maybe 400 of them, and then you have to have a book noting down what is the user and password you use. And that leads to the cyber security These are the issues that we like to get a voice from the community that it have to be end. Government should coordinate to have a common idea, whatever you like to call in terms of technical. It's a technical flaw that need to give the answer. But the community have to say that we don't accept this. Government coming up with a website, I have to go for select the election place, or my kids go to school, there's a website of the Ministry of Education, then you go to the health, you go to the tax authority, you can go on and on and on and on. And then government just say, okay, you're using internet and you have user and password. And these are the first thing that, for example, that can put it in the ICT master plan. That's how we're gonna go. Thailand proposing the e-authentication frameworks in the ICT master plan on how we're gonna do. NIST just coming out with the mobile issues. Some of you might need to read that they're not allowed to use the OTP anymore on the mobile because it's a threat. So then community have to say something about this. That are the few points I mentioned. Because I try to talk on the role of government to make it concrete. Government should raise the concern back to the communities in a way that is intricately on what is a problem we like to find out from communities and lead the technicals or the people around the issues that relate to this that in the public policy.
Any other speakers would like to make a comment?
I think so Lee talked about the ASEAN ICT master plan as a master plan that is economic focus, and I think we all know that this is like really very all master plans actually, no, ICT master plans, not just in the ASEAN but also in local level, where they only think about actors in that can contribute in the economy and not really civil society who are working on human rights, women's rights, sexual rights, right? So that's something that we really want to change, no? And when discussing about internet governance, and that's also something that we also want to, as Jack said, we wanted to really get private sector's cooperation, friendly private sector's cooperation. Yeah, to be able to really to also help us in giving help us help us to have space in those discussions. So that's one, and the other thing is about regional and local. So we always think, or we always say that the conversation should really start in the local level. But what if there's no space there? So that's why civil society organizations in like in Vietnam or in Malaysia or in different countries who are somehow societies that are restrictive, also try to raise these issues in the regionally, because they don't have space in their countries. So
Other would like to speak on these issues? Oh yeah, one, and then Billy would also speak for Korea experience. Please take your
Hi, my name is Jalen. I'm from the Philippines. And just maybe, I think that the ongoing challenge when it comes to ASEAN is, I think it's good that our representative from Thailand is here. Because, and I will start my lobbying now, it's really the government who holds the entry point. So in all those pillars, including the master plan, it's actually the government who has really the say who comes to meetings. So if that would be an opening, an opportunity, I mean, not to be threatened by the civil society organizations and to have a similar environment, similar to what IGF has been proposing to do, I think that's really an opportunity in Southeast Asia, right, sir? And I think for the next coming 2017, it's also a challenge for the Philippines, since Philippines will be chairing the ASEAN, to possibly come up with a similar model which eventually might give birth to not, I cannot say it's more open in the Philippines. I cannot really say that. But given the vibrancy of the NGOs in the Philippines, there is a possibility of having that. And I think the support of other regional NGOs and other actors in the region could also pave way to a more IGF or multi-stakeholder discussion.
Hi, nice to meet you, everyone. My name is Billy. I'm with KISA. My company is sort of half private, half public. We help Korean government to set up policies and develop technologies in internet promotion and information security. First, I would like to take upon Wanami's point. I think including ICT, all technologies actually value neutral. You know, technologies can be used to surveil or monitor your own people, just like big brothers, in some sense. And also can be used to make our life better. And so there, I think government, internet governance dialogue, I think there's a government role is needed. And actually, I happen to be main member for the Internet Governance Forum under UN umbrella, and I observed it was my very first time to attend there. 2 weeks ago actually, yeah. Still in a little bit jet lag, so a little bit confused. Anyway, was there, and I observed that the government participation, and here also APR IGF, I see low level of participation from the government. So I have a concern. Probably we need to, come up with some, plans how to attract more government, because I think government. There should be government as one of the stakeholder. I think we need a government as well for this multi-stakeholder dialogue. And also, I want to share a little bit about Korean, dialogue in terms of internet governance in Korea. Internet governance is also part of duty for my division, also in my company. And we try to give us some momentum for the live active discussion for the internet governance. But it was very difficult because since internet governance is large topic. When like 10 years ago, when we talk about internet governance, it was like a very relatively simple. Who gets what? Like for the internet critical resources, who gets last pieces on. But now we are talking about so many comprehensive issues, from gender issues and human rights, security. So we tried to find some experts, try to get some people who has expertise in their field, and wanted to get convene one place and to talk about like solutions, how we can solve any those issues which is related to internet. But it was the challenging hurdle. First hurdle was that everyone has their own domain. It's like a silo. They want to. It's like there are already existing forum, and we are talking about issues like there are forums for internet information security. There are forums for privacy, and so what's in it for me? Why we have to go there? So that's the first challenge for us, and probably global at the regional level and global level, maybe we share this same. So I would be very appreciated if anyone, any panel or participants have any good practice that you did in your country to solve this problem. Thank you.
Does anyone would like to respond to that? Well, really interesting about the breaking the silo, because that's also very, in my experience in Indonesia, we are also having this Indonesia Internet Governance Forum. One of the way is we have like a routine meeting not routine meeting, but it's more into people getting together. We like to get together. This is our culture. We like to have a coffee or any cafe in between us. So, so we have informal discussions, routine discussions together with Geneva Internet Platform Hub. So that is actually the one that really break the silo, so people can really speak and knows each other, no decision-making processes, really very informal. It's after office hours, so people are really be themselves and not necessarily have to have the identity outside, inside the organizations, yeah. So that's actually one of the good points of having this to break the silo. I think Mana would like to respond.
Very short one from the Philippines on the issues of ICT master plans. I think in general, one thing I like to leave as a thinking is that for government, for us, we always require credentials who we are, and that creates a silo because it's legally binding us. If you don't do it, like in Thailand, you go to the court. Administrative court, because you're sitting on the legal that if somebody filed a complaint, you have to take this content down. If you don't do it, you neglect it, you did not behave, so then they put in the administrative court. You're losing pension, you're losing. Government dealing with credentials, who we are. If you want to be the CAC, you need to be appointed by the government. Then come to the private sector. You don't know who you are. There are no credentials. That's why I urge that you need to formulate organized way. You have articles. You just have something document that who you are. Then your opinion will be counted for sure. And that always lacking in most of the case. Even in ICANN, we're facing these problems. They used to talk, there used to be a famous word that they call government capture. And I'm joking in the meeting, I showed a mobile phone and I said, capture, and they take photograph and they said, this is mean capture for my meaning. Because they thought that one government, when you're dealing with consensus, we have 184 countries in the meeting. If one country raises a hand that they objection, we cannot have advice on anything at all. And we just discussed that in the multi-stakeholder. The issue is the private sector, the credential is not required. So how the government will be react? Is a voice is coming only from this person or 2 or 3 persons that not really listen? That's what I like to raise, that we urge that you need to have, it can be just a groups, associations or the clubs or whatever stuff, but if we can look through, if it is on the website or in document that you attach when you propose something, say, okay, we need to listen and we know to whom we should contact. That's what I like to raise. That's a way to communicate to the government. And the other thing that Delhi mentioned, I think we're setting up the national multi-stakeholder, very much the same as CGI.BR in Brazil, heading currently by the minister, and we have put it as a national multi-stakeholder, just get the approval from the cabinet. Just waiting for the first meeting. It took 3 years for us to setting up this. And we want to use this committee to de-silo 20 departments involved in the internet to listen to this committee in terms of principle and elections, and we try to put the committee, civil society, to give an opinion to this committee.
It's a very nice experience and explanations. Who would like to also comment on this or any comment from the speakers? Lee, perhaps?
I like the idea of the national kind of committee thing for internet governance or internet policy issues. I think it's always about the process, right? I mean, how do you do that in a way that, I mean, for instance, you're thinking about, I mean, it works both ways. It can be really good if you're trying to protect rights, but it could also work against you. Let's say if you're thinking of a project that's looking at how do you quickly roll out access to communities. Committees, as we all know, tend to take time to reach a agreement. And I think for really strategic and important national projects, I think we need to think about, oh, what's the right process? Do everything need to go to the committee for discussion? I think there's some things that we probably want things to move faster, and a kind of a separate consultation process where civil society is involved could be better than committee. I think that's important. I like the point as well about the fact about technical knowledge. I think that's where capacity building, and this is where Jack, I think you mentioned a really good point about capacity building is so important, right? I think there's so many studies out there, and I'm just wondering how are we involving the academia, in that sense, the universities, in that process of how do we put it in a way that's easy for people to digest, in a lingo that's easy for laymen to understand. So for instance, when I talk about SME stuff, when you bring a specific research to SME, how do you put it in a way that they say that, oh, I can see why, let's say, cross-border data flows are really important to me, because it means that it's easier for me to then sell my services to, let's say, outside the Philippines, right, or outside Malaysia. So in that sense, I think the academia, maybe that could be a nice relationship we could try to grow. I mean, because like on the private sector end, we do commission a lot of academics to kind of run reports. But we do that with the idea of telling government or sharing with government what the opportunities are and what they need to watch out for. I think it'd be really nice to have that process where the academics talk to the civil societies as well, to say that, okay, you know, we have this research, or very interesting points you raised, I'm going to include that in my research, which could then therefore be put before, let's say, the right policy makers for them to consider.
Hi, I'm Renuka from India. I just wanted to sort of comment or flag another aspect. I mean, talking of silos, we have been clubbing civil society as one group, but within civil society, again, you have these different silos, no? I mean, you have those who are working on conventional offline human rights and those who are working on internet rights, and there's also a bit of the territorial sort of the tussle that is there. So I guess in all this, how do you reach out to the larger community in order to be part of governance? Is also to reach out, is also to expand this silo, I guess, in a way. We work in silos, but at least we can expand these silos so that they are larger and more representative and more inclusive and bigger, and therefore have a stronger voice. So I guess, I mean, I know that APC, for instance, there are representatives, members of APC here. They are working on a project that looks at sort of linking the offline and the online rights and groups which are working on these respective rights, and therefore sort of expanding that conversation. So just to say that, you know, I mean, we have a, I mean, I've been here the last 2 days and I'm not a part of this conversation on a regular, I mean, usually. And I find again that this is a very limited space, and it's the elite sort of, within the civil society, within the internet, sort of all the stakeholders concerned who are part of this IGF, whether it is global, regional, national level that we are talking about. So it needs to become like commonplace. No, the conversation has to become very common. So my mother knows, for instance, or she's part of the whole governance structure. I mean, she participates in governance, so to speak. So just that, just a thought. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Haley from NetMission. Actually, I have some curious about the low participation of government in this region, because I see although there are a lot of vibration from the community and civil society about IG, but and at the same time, if the government participate in IG, there is a huge benefit in political landscape. They have more say and they have more presence. But what is the rationale behind and challenges behind that hinder this happening? And also, I have heard that in South Korea, the country is trying to have some program for the youth to let more youth to learn more about IG, and so that more people from the South Korea can participate in South Korea, in the regional and global level. So I would like to know how come what's the rationale behind for the situation in this region? Thanks.
So, Jack, do you want to say something before I respond?
Okay, I think maybe responding similarly, no? Just as we think that the private sector is one monolithic group, civil society one monolithic group, government one monolithic group, actually inside there's many differences, right? And the thing with internet governance is that it does require some level of familiarity with the terrain in order to be able to engage. Just like one of it was saying, no, if you can attend an ICANN conversation and you come out don't know what's going on, alphabet soup. But there are also, the thing with internet governance is as the internet becomes more and more embedded in all aspects of our lives, there becomes more entry points to come in. So then that enables different ways of engaging into the process, and it's not always in the dialogue about ICANN. It's not always in the dialogue about IG even. It could be in a conversation at very local levels about economic development at some point, and it doesn't mean or right to information at different points. But the challenge then is how do we then pull all of these different things together, and how do we, as people who maybe are to some extent familiar with the process, act as this kind of translator or bridge builder. I think that bit is a little bit critical, and I think every single stakeholder group can play this role to some extent. The reason governments are a bit reluctant to engage in internet governance is because of maybe the multi-stakeholder process. It is a very different kind of a dynamics in terms of how governments engage with citizens and how governments engage with different stakeholders. You know, like in democratic processes, there's the very formal route, right? Like Vanami was also saying, you need credentials, you need different ways to engage. But multi-stakeholder process is a little bit more informal. You kind of sit down and you kind of accept that actually maybe the government doesn't know everything, and maybe civil society doesn't know everything. And so we come here with our partial knowledge to get to know something a bit more. But this is quite challenging to some governments. Like I know, I have not really seen the government of Malaysia engage in IG. Maybe in the early days a little bit in the WSIS process, but not so much in IGF. And that's an important challenge, like the ability of you to say that actually this has value to you. Engaging in this process is incredibly valuable. We don't all, you know, you can engage in this conversation from so many different points of view. So how do we, and I think the only way to do this is really to also start, actually no, I don't think the only way to do it is start national. I think the way to do it is like sandwich. Go global, go national, go regional, and sort of go at every direction that you can.
Is it me? Yeah. So, two comments, sort of. One, the lady from India, I think you said, you talked about the different silos. So my question would be that, you know, I'm not quite sure how you break down those silos, because I think some people are very comfortable in the silos they're in. And some people like to sell their ideas where it's bought easily, so that I think is also another issue. To my mind, I think the bigger question is how do the silos talk to each other? If there's a little bit of coordination between them, you know, sometimes they may not agree on everything, but at least there's a communication channel open that may help the conversation a little bit. In terms of the question on the governments, I think Jack covered one aspect of it. I think the other aspect is the fact that some governments just can't afford to go to all these meetings. There's also money, and the same thing goes to civil society and others, even private sector for that matter. You know, there's so many meetings that happen throughout the year on so many topics. Having sufficient budget I mean, in my organization, struggle to cover all the meetings we get invited to. In fact, we decline, I think, 80% because we just don't have the resources to, either people or money to get there. So, and that, I think, resonates with a lot of institutions, and particularly if you look at the civil society sector, and particularly people from the non-profit sector, you know, you have to put your priorities in order where you spend that money. And a lot of governments have the same problem. So let's not assume governments have a big pot of money, or sometimes they do, but they go missing too. So, you know, but but the question still remains. It's a resourcing issue as well, and the resourcing has multiple components too.
Thank you, Raj. I think Billy will close, and I'll make a bit of summary then finish.
Yeah, I pretty much concur with what has what have been said by Jack. Why the level of government are getting lower and lower. But I just want to give one more reason. Since IGF is not decision-making body, I think that's the reason. And also there are already, they are attending intergovernmental organization, yeah, like OECD, ITU, which is decision-making in standard or economy. And so that's why the reason they don't see any good reason to be this multi-stakeholder dialogue. They don't see that. And you want me to explain more about the Internet Governance Academy in Korea?
Or perhaps later on, because it's already finished. Apology for this, but I don't want to keep you away from your lunch.
Okay, yeah. So,
sorry.
Yeah, just a little bit short
Yes,
ads. Just I'll take just 30 seconds. We brought the brochure, and we will put outside. And if you interested, please take a look at. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Billy. I think Wanawit would like to speak 10 seconds.
I'd like to give 5 seconds. The reasons government is not there because government need formality. Internet is not formal, not intergovernmental, nothing. We cannot have a budget to go. That are the problem the government representative in internet keep getting. It's a side job. You not get the reward. Your boss is chasing you. They complain. So nobody like to work in internet. That are the problem. I mentioned already, we need to make an elephant dance. Government have to. In Europe, it's not a problem. In Asia, it's every country have a problem. They cannot get the budget because there are no treaty, no intergovernmental, nothing. Community will help us. That's why I come to support. You are the taxpayer. You need your voice. That you need this elephant to support you, and we fixing the problems.
Well, thank you very much for a very nice and very fruitful discussions. I would like to just one point that you have to know that IGF at the global level is really trying to really engage with the national and regional IGF. So this conversation will not stop here. It will start. It's just starting. So please do not frustrated with the process of multi-stakeholders and your political context. Let's just continue to do this. I would like to thank you and would like to, how about a round of applause for our speakers? Thank you very much and enjoy your lunch.